Hello and welcome to North 100, the Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm not Serge. I'm Liam, and Serge isn't here today, but that's okay. We're going to press on without him. I'm joined by Jeremy and Alex, as usual. So it's all going to be fine. Trust me, it'll be okay. A quick reminder before we start that everything on the Loading Ready Run video network is brought to you by you at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. So thank you so much for your support. Couldn't do this without you. Before we get into today's theme, we're going to talk about the best card you're not playing. And up today, Alex.
What's up?
What's the best card we're not playing?
Well, Demonic Tutor is a very good card.
4 points even. We talked about it last episode. Quattro, as you'll all remember.
I think a bunch of people are playing that one, though.
Who can afford 4 points?
It's a lot of points.
What if you have other cards that you want instead?
Right.
What if I told you could free roll Demonic Tutor?
I would say you're cheating.
I'm not cheating.
All right.
The card I'm talking about is Diabolic Intent.
Judges hate him.
Judges hate him. It is essentially the same card as Demonic Tutor. It's 1 and a black.
With upside.
It's one of these cards. You know what? Maybe this has something in common with Lion's Eye Diamond, where it's like, oh, we'll print it with a downside that in the right deck is actually just an upside. So it's still 1 and a black sorcery. Search your library for anything. Put it in your grip. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature, which would be a downside. Unless you're playing, I don't know, Aristocrats, Sandra Bullock, you cast this into your Academy Rector, it's pretty dumb.
Like you sack your Academy.
Alluring.
Yes, exactly, Alluring. So it is as powerful and the exact same mana cost as Demonic Tutor, but with a cost that sometimes you're quite happy to play.
You actively want to pay.
Yeah, and it's 0 points. So this card's nuts. It'll find you anything. It's very good in Aristocrats because it finds you whatever engine piece you need, be that a creature or like an enchantment. You go get Goblin Bombardment or whatever and just get them.
You get the card you're splashing red for?
Yep.
Oh, God.
The
You and Graham both, Paul. You both do this to us.
Yeah, the Invocation's a thing.
I mean, I actually like this sort of like cycle of the Invocations, like the Entomb, the Dark Ritual, and this all sort of go together.
Yeah.
But it's hard to read the text.
Yeah.
Is it an instant? Is it a sorcery? How would I know?
It's in the middle of the hieroglyphs.
Right. Fair enough.
Anyway.
Yeah. So card's good.
It's good.
Seems reasonable.
Very hot.
So for today's theme, we wanted to do an episode we've been talking about doing for a little while. We get a lot of questions about, hey, when I'm going to build a deck, should I play this card or that card? And we think we have a bit of a tendency on the show to sort of bias ourselves towards talking about like the really nuts cards, the 9s out of 10, the 10 out of 10s, the really, really good ones. But we don't spend enough time talking about the cards that are obvious, cards that we don't necessarily think about when we're putting into a deck, but that are very important and are going to make up a large portion of the body of your deck, right? Every card in your deck can't just be some insane bomb. You need some other synergy pieces. So today we're talking about what we've called the nuts and bolts of your deck. So we have 5 different lists, one for each color. We're going to share them after the show so that you can look at them as well. But these are basically, as you'll remember, I may have constructed a counterspells tier list some time ago. This is a similar kind of idea. We want to give you a frame of reference to work with for a lot of different kinds of cards to make the deck building process a little easier for you and to try to impart our sort of years of wisdom, our years of playing the format onto you so that you can kind of get these cards into your deck more easily, and you don't have to play a bunch of times to figure it out. Mm-hmm. So to start off, we're going to talk about some white cards. We're going to talk about some 2-power 1-drops in white.
Weenies.
That's a good word for them. And the first one we have is Kytheon, Hero of Akros. Jared, can you talk to me about what the white weenie strategy generally wants, and then maybe why Kytheon is sort of the premier card in this category?
Yeah. So generally, the white weenie strategy wants to go wide, which means put a bunch of threats in play at once and sort of present more attackers than they can present defenders. Kytheon fits into that shell perfectly because it's a 1 mana cost, 2-power creature, and it has upside for going wide, and it also has built-in defensive tools as well.
Right.
Did you mention the part where it turns into a planeswalker?
I didn't, but I probably should have.
It also turns into a planeswalker.
Yeah,
that was sort of the upside for going wide. If you attack with it and 2 other creatures, it transforms into Gideon Battleforged, which then just
has 3 abilities.
Yeah.
Is Baby Chad.
Yeah, Baby Trad, 3 loyalty. He has a +2 that forces one creature to attack him during his next turn. He has another +1 where target creature gains indestructible and untap it, and it stays indestructible until your next turn. Also, he attacks as a 4/4 with indestructible. 1 mana is not a big investment to get a 4/4 indestructible.
No.
Right.
Second best 1 mana planeswalker.
Behind Deathray Shaman?
Yeah.
Fair
Deathray
enough.
Shaman, which
All
is
right,
on this list.
so that's the very, very tip top. Alex, why don't you talk to me about the next two? We have Soldier of the Pantheon, and then also Isamaru, Hound of Konda. What makes these slightly worse than Gideon?
Well, they
Kytheon, sorry.
don't turn into planeswalkers,
Right.
which is pretty big. Soldier of the Pantheon is good because it has 2 relevant subtypes. Human soldier, same as Gideon. It has protection from multicolored, which means
Monocolored,
that
so
it
messed up.
walks straight through and blocks all day. You're sort of I'm just trying to think of some creatures off the top of my head.
Geist to Saint Draft.
Kess.
Yeah,
Bogart, Ram Gang.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of random multicolored
Oh,
cards.
Kitchen Finks. That
Kitchen Finks.
one's
That's
important.
all right. That's a good one.
And it gets even better because whenever an opponent casts a multicolored spell, you gain 1 life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not anywhere near as good as something like, say, Core Firewalker.
Sure.
In that effect, but it's similar. So you're just getting tiny little incremental advantage, and there's no investment at all.
Yeah.
It's just a freebie you get. This card's good.
Yeah, one thing we should point out is that all the text on these cards is basically gravy. Like,
Yeah.
you're playing these cards for their base stats, and the additional text you get is just
The
a
very
bonus.
worst ones are just 1 mana, 2/1, full stop. And that's sometimes good enough. Isamaru, it has 2 toughness.
Seems good.
Comes up.
The end.
Yeah.
It has 2 toughness and 2 power, and it costs 1.
Yeah, so-
and it has no downside.
Yeah, and so the one thing about these two that makes them slightly better, they're slightly harder to kill too, right? Electrolyze, pretty commonly played card, can't kill Soldier of the Pantheon and doesn't get to 2 for 1.
I tell a
Isamaru.
lie. The downside is that it can be bounced with Caracas, but you can save 2 damage on it with
Iganjo Castle.
Iganjo Castle.
Yeah.
It also costs 1, so getting it bounced by Caracas, not the end of the world. Jared, why don't you talk to me about the differences between Dryad Militant, Mardu Woe Reaper, and Skymarch Aspirant?
So 2 of the 3 of them are sort of the most disruptive of the one-drops. Dryad Militant is really good against blue decks, stopping their instants and sorceries going to their graveyard for Delve later. Or Snapcaster stops that shenanigans later on. Mardu Woe Reaper can tag a creature out of the graveyard if you're playing against Reanimator and also gains you life. Just that incremental advantage Alex was talking about earlier.
And
And
it's just being able to snipe important creatures that might have relevance later, things with like Unearth
Definitely,
or some sort
yeah.
of ability.
Yeah, and notable, you can target any graveyard, so you can even target a creature in your graveyard that doesn't have any graveyard relevance just to gain the life. And then Skymarcher Aspirant.
I did just type it wrong. Great.
Is a new one. It's mostly just a 2/1, but in the late game it becomes a 2/1 flyer with Ascend, which is, I think, reasonably easy to hit in the White Weenie deck. You're like looking to go wide. You're looking to have a bunch of permanents in play. You're not playing many instants and sorceries.
You often have tokens.
Exactly. So it's not unreasonable that you'll hit Ascend in this deck, and once you hit 2/1 flyer for 1, that's an insane rate.
One other small note about Dryad Militant, it's because it's a hybrid cost, you can play it in green or white.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, now let's talk about. We've sort of gotten through all the ones with like really like good incidental text, and now we're getting into either no incidental text or very marginal incidental text. So Alex, why don't you talk to me about Dragon Hunter, Expedition Envoy, and Elite Vanguard?
So Dragon Hunter, well, it has protection from dragons, and it can block dragons, although it had reach.
Have you ever seen this come up?
Maybe once or twice, but when it does, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Most of the time, this will be completely irrelevant.
Yep.
But the couple times that it is, you're going to feel like God.
I watched someone block a Thundermaw Hellkite.
I was gonna say I can't remember who it was, but we were playing and they like ripped Thundermaw off the top to hit me down to like 5 or less. Then I'm like, oh man, what can I draw? I draw Dragon Hunter, slam it, and I'm like, haha. And then they play Stormbreath Dragon, and Yeah,
Kill you
minions.
anyway.
Ironically, Dragon Hunter can't block Stormbreath Dragon because it
'Cause
has
it's got
protection
Pro
from
White.
white.
Wow.
Whoops.
But yeah, it's a huge upside that's really narrow. As for Expedition Envoy and Elite Vanguard, they are 2/1s for 1. They're both humans. One's a scout ally, and the other one's just, I think, a human soldier.
I think soldier, yeah.
So human soldier is probably a little bit more useful. Yeah, soldier is a kind of relevant subtype. Ally is pretty far down the ladder.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, neither of them are like massively important,
But they're fine.
Yeah, but they're fine. And again, these are just vanilla 2/1s. All right, Jared, we get to the bottom of the list of Savannah Lions with Savannah Lions. So why is this one at the? We actually have one more below this, but why is this one kind of the bottom?
Just because of its creature type, cat is a less relevant creature type than human.
Though it's getting better.
It is getting better, but it's just by and large a 1-mana 2/1 with no other relevant text, even creature
I mean,
type.
I
So.
suppose you play this when you're really trying to push density as hard as possible.
Yeah, like it is still a 2-power 1-drop, so it's like it's on the list. It is playable, but it's definitely worse than the other ones we've mentioned thus far.
All right, and the last one we have on this list actively has downside. This is Loyal Pegasus. So this is a 2/1 for a single white that has flying, but can only attack if it attacks with another creature.
Yeah. This is a pretty awkward turn 1 play.
Yeah.
I don't think that I would ever play this card.
It's super niche.
The blow up potential is so high.
It's really high.
I guess, I mean,
Yeah,
like
it's just
evasion.
like you play an extra thing and then they kill your thing before you go to combat, then you can't attack again.
Oh, for
It
you.
just- yeah. Yeah, the reason why I put this one on the list is you only want to play this in like the decks that literally want basically every 1-drop. So there's like some like white kind of like very low to the ground like flying decks slash like where you're playing all the 1-mana 2/1s. You're playing like Suntail Hawk, that kind of thing, and this gets into that deck.
Maybe.
Sometimes. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, the worst case is you're paying 10 cents to be disappointed. So,
But yeah, and then it's also we wanted to put this one on here just for context.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't play this card unless you really
this is a
can.
do not pass line.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the weenies. Next, we're going to move on to one list we've already sort of visited. This is counterspells. And so a lot of these are going to be 2-mana counterspells, but we've also thrown in some counterspells of different costs to give you a little context. So the first 10 or so are maybe the top 10 counterspells, and then after that, it's largely 2-mana counterspells that you might
Or
also
just like-
play.
yeah,
or
there's-
just like flying stuff
Yeah.
that you might play. So let's start off with we had a bit of a debate about what the best counterspell is, quote unquote.
Because it's always going to be contextual.
It is going to be contextual, that's
Yeah,
true. So
it depends on the deck and the meta you're planning to
Even
face.
like the turn you're on.
exactly. So Jared, let's start us off here. Let's talk about the top 2, whichever order you put them in. They're definitely 1 and 2. It's Mana Drain and Force of Will. So why are these counterspells so much better than basically everything else?
Well, the reason Mana Drain is so good is because it feels like you're ahead of your opponent no matter what. You counter their spell, and then you get mana for their spell after, so the tempo advantage is just crazy. You're often countering a spell that costs more than 2 mana, so you're already trading up on mana, and then you get the mana for their spell on your turn,
Yeah.
which is...
It's also a hard counter, which is to say it counters anything.
Yeah, and most of the counter spells on the top half of the list are either super efficient conditional counter spells or hard counter spells.
Yeah.
And the reason Force of Will is so nuts is because it allows you to progress your game plan and tap out with impunity while still being safe. And it's especially powerful in Highlander because it's really hard to play around a singleton card in a 100-card singleton format. You're like, am I really going to play around days when it's a 1 in 100 as opposed to a 4 in 60? Like,
Sometimes you have to.
it's really easy to play around it in Legacy because the chances they have it is just so much higher. But in Highlander, it's really hard to play around a single card, and playing around Force of Will is nearly impossible. So the blow-up potential you get with this card is just huge.
Yeah. All right, Alex, talk to me about counterspell.
It's Mana Drain, but worse.
Fair enough. But still just like very efficient.
It's 2 mana. It's hyper efficient. It counters anything. There's no other hoops to jump through. It's just like that spell. No.
Look at this counterspell art. See the nice little border, Alex?
Get out of here. That happens to all wizards.
Cryptic Command. What makes that one so good? It's the most expensive counterspell we've got on here so far.
This one is just kind of like a does everything card.
Right.
Whenever you cast this, it's always going to do the 2 best things that you could possibly have happen for you. It's so good that even at blue, 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 it shows up in tons of decks. Like anything that's like blue X, you're bound to see this card. You know, like 9 times out of 10. There's some like 3-color decks that I've even seen Cryptic Command in.
Yep.
Like it's insane. It keeps you from dying against aggro. It tempos your opponent. Like sometimes it just cantrips and like tempos them back. So it's 1 blue, blue, blue instant. You choose 2 from 4 really great options. There's like counter target spell, so hard counter, anything. Return target permanent, which includes land, to its owner's hand. Tap all creatures your opponents control, so it's like fog. Fog or open up the door for an alpha strike, or draw a card. So
it's never dead.
It's never dead. It will always do something.
Yep, fair enough. And then lastly, Jared, let's talk about Mana Leak. So this is 1 and a blue for a counterspell. It says counter target spell unless the controller plays 3. This is just good spell.
Yeah, it's super efficient. This is the first one that's sort of really splashable. All the other ones require a really huge commitment to blue mana.
Right.
But this one is really easy, only requires 1 blue mana, and chances are, especially in the early turns, they're not going to have a spare 3 mana around after they've already tapped some to cast their spell.
Yeah. So now we're getting to the point in the list. Those first 5 were sort of like, I don't want to say like super obvious, but those cards are all very good, right? We're talking about them and we're sort of like gushing because they're very powerful. I think now we're really getting into more of the sort of nuts and bolts feel where you aren't necessarily playing all of these spells. So talk to me about Remand, which is the next one we have on this list. So this is 1 and a blue for a spell. It says counter target spell. If this spell is countered this way, put it into its owner's hand instead of their graveyard, and you draw a card.
So I guess that this is the sort of quintessential tempo card, or tempo counter spell. One of them, anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of like unsummoned for a spell, and it also replaces itself, which is pretty powerful, actually.
Yeah.
The cantrip effect is good enough that sometimes people will remand their own spells to get a benefit out of it, to draw a card, or sometimes just like make additional copies of a storm spell or something.
Well, or you can just, if you're in a counter war and they're going to counter your business spell, you can remand that back, and then their counter spells don't do anything.
Yeah,
It's a powerful effect.
Especially if they're trying to fight you with things like Mana Drain or Cryptic Command, where they're trying to get
Advantage.
additional value off their counter spells. Remanding your own spell can be super powerful. It also enables you to just turn any, if you have a ton of mana and not many cards and you just need to cycle through your deck, you can cast a spell, remand it back just to get another card deeper into your deck.
So we play this card in most blue decks. What are the blue decks that don't want remand? Do you think there are any, or do you think this is still kind of pretty core that you would play this in most blue decks playing counter spells?
This is pretty core. I find this getting cut the most from mid-range, just because I find mid-range has the least need for the tempo advantage, just because you
just want an actual answer.
You're so efficient, and you just want answers in that deck. I find I play this a lot more in combo decks than I do some of the other counter spells.
Yeah, I get the sense that what combo decks want is something that's going to be cheap and splashable and efficient, and just set the opponent back a little tiny bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
let's talk about Spell Snare. This is the first 1 mana counter spell that gets onto the list, and there aren't that many. What is it about Spell Snare that puts it so high? This one's probably still fairly core too, right? You're playing this in almost all your blue decks.
A lot, yeah. Just the ability to trade up on mana. I mentioned it a little bit earlier with Mana Drain, but that's really what you want to try to do with your counter spells. Is you want to try to spend less mana on your counter spell than they did on their spell. This is also super, super powerful on the draw, because that's usually what the aggressive decks are trying to do against the blue decks, is use that turn 2 to sneak in under counter spells.
Yeah.
And Spell Snare just disables them from doing that.
it's also pretty good in counter wars, because a lot of the counter spells are 2 mana.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good 2-drops in this game. I also, looking at this card, I just realized there's one that we missed from the list. Mental Misstep.
I don't rate that highly,
Really?
honestly.
Not really. A lot of people have cut it recently. I think it's just a meta card. It depends
Okay, that's fair.
how often you can do it.
It is free.
It is. The issue is a lot of the mid-range decks are just going to be so powerful and so efficient that having a dead card in your hand against them is going to be too costly, and a lot of them aren't playing that many 1-drops, and most of their 1-drops are going to be answer cards. And so unless you're presenting threats to go with your mental misstep and you're using it to defend them, you also need it to line up in that instance. So it's just a little too conditional sometimes. But
let's talk about another conditional counterspell, but this one's, I think, a little bit better. This is Negate. So this is the first one. Everything else we've talked about so far is like a hard counterspell. Snare's conditional, obviously. This is the first one that can't hit any spell. It only hits non-creatures. But do you still play this in every blue deck, or do you cut it from some?
not every blue deck, for sure. Some blue decks, just like you can't afford to not be able to answer the creature. But it does have targets in most decks, so it's still fairly ubiquitous. So I certainly couldn't fault anyone
this
for playing
counters
it.
like
but
planeswalkers, artifacts, sorceries, enchantments, instants.
A lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Also, if you have access to black, you can play this card only better in the form of counter squall.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Same text, counter target, non-creature spell, but
they lose 2 life.
yeah, the controller loses 2 life.
Get them.
Okay, let's talk about, we were talking about free counters. Alex, talk to me about Daze.
Oh boy, how'd you like a counter spell for free? Mostly,
Sometimes.
but also sometimes an upside.
Yeah.
If you want to make your land drops. It's a force spike effect, so it counters any spell unless they pay 1 for 1 and a blue. But there's an alternative cost where you can bounce an island instead of paying for it. So it's the same kind of thing as Force of Will. Obviously less strong because it's not just counter anything. But if they're tapped out, it's basically Force of Will.
Yeah.
Because this will hit any spell. If they don't have the 1 mana up, that play is countered. Also, you can use it to maybe, like if you have a land drop up, sometimes you can, is there a way you can game it, or is it always a disadvantage to have your island bounced?
I mean,
I feel
always
like
a
I'm thinking about
disadvantage.
Gush.
it's like you can sometimes, like if they try to wasteland a non-basic island, you can like start a counter war and daze them, returning the island they try to wasteland. Like there's small things, nothing
corner
like
case, but-
nothing
Or it
massive.
can be advantageous under like back to basics or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the big deal is it comes out of nowhere and it doesn't cost any mana. So
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, something a little. Legacy players might find this odd to see this so low down the list, but Highlander is just a little bit slower than Legacy. That the games tend to go a bit longer, and so the 1 mana tax on days is just
less good.
less reliable. Exactly.
And this card gets cut. This is definitely the first one that we've talked about. This and Negate probably are the first ones that aren't core anymore. You want to be ending the game quickly. Like Daze is much less good in the control decks, and it's a lot better in the kind of like tempo decks or the more proactive decks where you can force fights when people don't have that much mana.
Yeah.
All right, the next card we're going to talk about is in a similar vein. It's Spell Pierce. This is another tax and counter spell. It's a single blue mana for counter target spell unless its controller pays 2.
Non-creature spell.
Non-creature spell, same idea. So yeah, same kind of idea as with Negate here, just like slightly worse. Is that
Yeah,
basically the
slightly
summation?
worse. Super efficient, but also very conditional
Yeah,
for
it's-
late
well, I
game
mean,
top deck.
It's slightly worse and slightly better. It's 1 generic cheaper to cast. Has the potential to hit all the spells that Negate would, but it's a soft counter, so if they have mana up, then it's no good. Although there's situations where, even if they can pay for it and will, sometimes you just want to prevent them from casting additional spells by having to utilize that mana.
That's true.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's talk about the first 3 mana counterspell on this list. This is Disallow, and we're sort of using Disallow as a proxy for 3 mana counterspell that you can cast. So Disallow is 1 blue for an instant that counters target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability, and this is the most common 3 mana counterspell we see. Jer, what's the difference between this and say Cancel, and why does this see play and a card like Cancel can't?
So the reason this card sees play is because of the additional activated ability or triggered ability countering capabilities of this card. Having it's almost like a split card counterspell / stifle, and just that extra utility pushes it over the edge into playability. It makes it a better top deck if your opponent's already resolved something like a Planeswalker or a GT or something.
Yeah, I mean,
just being able to counter a Planeswalker ability or a GT activation can sometimes turn the tide of the game, whereas the Council will just
This is virtually a strict upgrade on Void Slime, which is the same card, but
Easier to cast.
blue, green,
yeah.
and 1.
blue, green.
Yeah,
blue, green.
Yeah.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
it's blue, green.
Yeah,
so, yeah, it's
This is just easier to cast.
it's easier to cast. You know, they're both the exact same effect, but yeah, disallow will just, you know, it's another one of these sort of toolkitty kind of deal with whatever problem you have.
Yeah.
Sort of spells.
When do you not play a card like Disallow? When do you not play 3-mana counter spells in your deck?
You won't play them in combo decks just because you're not looking to pay that much mana for counter spells, and you also may not play them in tempo decks just because, once again, you're not looking to pay that much mana to interact. You just want cheaper stuff.
All right.
This is you'll typically find in control decks.
All right. The next sort of 6 we have are all 2-mana counter spells, or 7, sorry. They're all 2-mana counter spells, and they kind of are on a sliding scale of quality. So, Alex, talk to me about Logic Knot. I have this one at the highest. I don't know whether you agree necessarily, but what's good about Logic Knot, and why do we play it?
So Logic Knot is technically a soft counter. It's blue X, counter target spell unless its controller pays X. But it has Delve, so that X cost you can basically pay for free. And if you're in the kind of deck that fills its bin pretty reliably, which I think is the kind of deck that you want to be playing this in, like blue-red spells kind of style decks love this card. This is just going to be a lot better than Mana Leak.
Yep.
A little less splashy on the mana colors, but you know it's most of the time I think going to act a lot like Counterspell.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind is, like, you might play this card less if you're taxing your graveyard a lot. So if you have other Delve spells in your deck, odds are those are going to take the place of a card like Logic Knot. But if you're not taxing your graveyard that much, the value on this card goes up a lot. Also, if you have exactly Vile Smasher the Fierce in your deck, this card is the Stone Cold Nuts, as it is oftentimes Fireball with Vile Smasher in play.
Delve cards with Vile Smasher is really good. I probably want to build that deck again. Grixis Vile Smasher is just like...
Vile Smasher the Fierce.
Is 1 black-red for a 2/3 that says whenever you cast your first spell each turn, Vile Smasher the Fierce deals damage equal to that cost, spell's converted mana cost, to an opponent chosen at random. Shockingly, in a 2-player format, that means them all the time. Have you ever forced them to make you roll the dice? I've done that before. Where you're like, all right, we're going to choose at random. 1 to 6 is you. And then they get hit.
What if it lands on its side?
Well, then I lose. It's pretty awkward.
All right. That's fair.
Next one we're going to talk about is miscalculation, and then also I'm going to fold into this one for you, Jared, memory lapse. Talk about why these ones are a little lower on the list than the other 2-mana counter spells.
Miscalculation gets into the realm of just 2 mana is much easier to pay than 3. Like, just in terms of turns waiting to cast like your big payload spell, people are often willing to like play around Miscalc and Spell Pierce and Daze, but just can't afford to play around Mana Leak, and that's why Mana Leak's so much higher up the list. It is really nice that you can cycle it when it's dead, but you put the counter spells in your deck to counter spells and not to cycle them.
Yeah, I mean, the Miscalculation is comparable a little bit to Mana Leak. It exchanges the taxation on its counter for the ability to cycle it when you don't need it. So that's kind of handy, but you know, you're also it's better and worse.
Yeah.
Simultaneously. So the card is perfectly playable, but you know, play Mana Leak first.
Yeah, and what decks? This one seems kind of context dependent. What decks want miscalculations versus which ones don't?
The faster decks will tend to want miscalculation. They'll be able to cycle it into a burn spell later when they don't need the counter spell, and they'll be able to keep the game like tight and compressed enough that the 2-mana taxation cost is still worthwhile.
All right, so let's talk about memory lapse. So 1 and a blue for counter target spell. Put that spell on top of its owner's library.
This is just another tempo spell. It's probably closest analog is Remand. You're not drawing a card, but you're stopping them from drawing a card, so it's still card neutral. It just has the same problem with Remand, is that it doesn't actually deal with the threat permanently. They're going to have it again next turn. Yeah. It can be really, really nice in the late game when they're top decking and they cast something like an elf, and you can make them redraw the elf. That's when it's at its most powerful.
That's pretty
Making
sweet.
them redraw a spell they really don't want to draw.
Is this card insane in Lantern Control?
It's probably pretty good.
Probably.
Or you just follow this up with like not Mental Note, Thought Scour.
Yeah, Thought Scour
Get
then.
'em.
You remand their big spell, then you activate your I mean, there's a bunch
Codex
of
Shredder?
Codex Shredder.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
thinking some of the 2-mana creatures that mill them and you get value for it. What's the one in a blue flyer? It's a 1/1 and you mill them and then it gets power.
Mind Shrieker?
Mind Shrieker. There you
Yeah.
go. You Mind Shrieker them.
The bird.
Anywho,
Let's talk about delay.
delay. Another sort of tempo-y card.
This is 1 in a blue. Sorry for a counter spell that says counter target spell, and then you suspend it with 3 suspend counters on it.
Yeah. So this one, I suppose, is pretty close to Memory Lapse in that, like, it kind of. This is a later problem for me to worry about, but in a sort of faster tempo-y deck, I think this used to see a lot of play in the sort of like Sorensen green-blue tempo style Miracle Grow decks because it puts off their bomb or relevant spell long enough that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and it's worse than Memory Lapse because it's not actually card neutral. Like, you are losing a card if they get to cast it again,
Yeah.
but the plan is just don't let them cast it
Yeah,
again.
it's just like it stalls it for 3 whole turns, and then in an emergency you could probably counter it on the way back if you have something.
This one's really good in counter wars as well, because if you delay a counter spell, they're probably not going to have anything to counter in their upkeep.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the last 3 we have are fairly context-based, and so I'm just going to quickly go over them and talk about the context in which you might play them. Evasive Action is 1 in a blue for a domain counterspell. It says counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each basic land type you control. You want to play this if you're playing like a 3 or 4 color aggressively slanted tempo deck. You might play this card. Unified Will was Alex's best card you're not playing a little while ago. This one's pretty self-explanatory. You want to play this one if you got more creatures in your deck than them by a lot. So like Fish, Skies decks like that one. And then Arcane Denial, we talked about this one in the M25 set review. This is one that you only really want if you have red burn spells in your deck. And if you don't have exactly red burn spells in your deck, I would stay away from this card
Or
by
if you
and
have
large.
some reason where you're just like, I have to have more hard counters.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
matter what, I will pay any cost.
Maybe if you're a combo deck or something.
Yeah.
Speaking of red burn spells, we're actually going to skip over to those now. So let's talk about, when we're evaluating burn spells, I think there's sort of 2 tiers that we want to talk about. First, there's the burn spells that you might play in any deck. Then there are the burn spells that go in exactly burn.
Yeah.
So let's review the burn spells that go in any deck, and then we'll kind of list off for people where that list of burn spells that only go in the burn deck go.
Yeah.
So at the top here, Alex, let's lead off. What is the best burn spell?
It's Lightning Bolt.
Shocking. Sorry,
No,
not shocking. Lightning bolt. Bolting.
It's the most mana efficient, fastest, highest ratio of investment to damage spell, and it hits anything.
What about Chain Lightning?
Chain Lightning is a close second because it's the same efficiency, same amount of damage. For those of you who don't know, Lightning Bolt is 1 red, it's just red, instant, deal 3 damage to a creature player or planeswalker, as the rules will become
Not yet.
soon.
Speculative.
So
not
Chain
actually
Lightning
announced.
is red for...
The change is going to happen. They've announced it's going to happen.
All right.
So Chain Lightning is red sorcery. It deals 3 damage to creature or player. But it has this weird text that sometimes will come up.
Yeah.
Where each time
I had a
Chain
Legacy
Lightning
game
does
where this
damage,
mattered.
the controller can pay red to... Does it copy it? Or
Yeah,
does
it makes a new
It
one.
makes a copy.
Yeah, it makes a copy. So you could throw this back and forth.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's just sorcery Lightning Bolt.
Yeah.
But do be aware that if your opponent has access to red mana, like, I don't know, if you Blood Moon them or something, you might have this one bite you. But it's still really efficient.
It's really funny when you see it get changed back, because very rarely do both players realize that it's a line available. Usually it's just one of them realizes it can happen, and it's either the person casting the Chain Lightning hoping that they don't realize, or the person is like, ooh, Chain Lightning, free Lightning Bolt, okay, and the person who originally cast is like, oh no, this isn't Lightning Bolt.
Yeah. To just finish up my thought on these two and related the rest of them, these are, like, efficient burn spells are just problem solvers because they do almost everything. They kill creatures, they kill players, they planeswalkers. They're very seldom dead.
Yeah.
They're just very handy.
Yeah, so let's talk about, now that we've talked about Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning, we've sort of set the standard, which is 3 damage for 1 mana. Jar, I'm going to get you to talk about 3 cards at once here, actually. Incinerate, Searing Spear, and Lightning Strike. I know that they're slightly different, but they're all basically the same.
They're mostly the same.
These are 1 and a red for an instant that says deal 3 damage to target creature or player, and Incinerate specifies that A creature dealt damage this way can't be regenerated, which is going to come up occasionally, but for our purposes here, let's not worry about it. These are probably the next tier down. So what, like one more mana basically?
Yeah, one more mana, still instant, still very playable.
Yeah. All right, easy. Alex, let's get you to talk about Fiery Confluence.
Holy moly.
So this is 2 red for a sorcery that has it's modal. It's got 3 modes, and you get to choose any one of those modes up to 3, or you get to you choose 3. You can choose the same mode more than once. So the modes are deal 1 damage to each creature, deal 2 damage to each opponent, or destroy target artifact. So you could deal 4 damage to your opponent and destroy an artifact, or blow up 3 artifacts, or deal 3 damage to all creatures, or deal 2 damage to a player and 2 damage to creatures. This card's versatile.
It's red Cryptic Command is basically the easiest way to say that. And like that's not even a joke.
Yeah.
It's good for the same reasons that Cryptic is good in that it deals with problems in very flexible ways. And it will never be dead because the very worst case scenario for this is 4 mana, 6 to the face.
Do you think your deck has to be aggressive to play this card?
I don't think so. I've not seen many red decks that get up to 4 mana that don't play this.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like, even mono red will run this just because it's like 4 mana, 6 to the face.
Yeah, kills Platinum Empyrean. Oh wait, I'm Serge today. God, Platinum Empyrean. Kills Platinum Empyrean, thank God.
And then fours them.
Yeah, that's so great. Jared, talk to me about Fire Blast. So this is 4 red. So that's a 6 mana burn spell. That says Fire Blast deals 4 damage to target creature or player. However, you may sacrifice 2 mountains rather than paying Fire Blast mana cost. Now, before the show, we were talking about keeping this list limited to cards that can target creatures and players. So you'll notice there won't be Lava Spikes or things that only target creatures or only target players. Though those cards also, you
Like
could rank.
your
There are
flame
some
slashes and your roasts and stuff like that.
They're relevant as well. If you want to kill stuff, those are good. But we included Fire Blast because it technically can target creatures.
I've seen it happen. But yeah, most of the time this one's getting aimed upstairs. It's like the classic finish of like Price of Progress, Fire Blast you for 2 mana.
This is the symbol crash at the end of the concerto that is mono red
Yeah.
a lot of the time. Or red green is perfectly fine rolling this
Or
card.
even red blue.
Yeah,
like the mono red splash
like
a couple blue
red
cards.
X deck,
Yeah.
like big red, little like lowercase, whatever the other colored card is, because it's 4 to the face for free.
Yep.
Or maybe just like kill their batter skull for the turn to alpha strike them.
Yeah.
The sacking the 2 mountains is going to probably be the second to last action in the game. The last one being your opponent dying.
Yeah. All right, and then the last, or sorry, there's a couple more, but the next 2 in the not yet into only a mono red section are Arc Trail and Forked Bolt. And there are a couple of other cards in this category as well, but they're not exactly red. There's Electrolyze, there's Fire Ice, but these cards all kind of do the same thing. Alex, what's the kind of thing these cards do? So Arc Trail is 2 mana for a 2 damage, for a sorcery that deals 2 damage to target creature or player, and 1 damage to another target creature or player. Forked Bolt does the same, except it only costs a single red, and it's 1/1, not 2/1. What are we using these cards for?
To 2-for-1 people.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
It's these are really good spells because Forked Bolt especially, the number of 1 toughness creatures running around.
What is going on in this art?
2 people are getting lightning bolted. So
On an island?
imagine the scenario where they have Vendilion Clique and Snapcaster Mage. You're just like zap, 1 red, like just
Gotcha.
get them. And the same is sort of true of Arc Trail. Only the 2 damage hits like a whole lot more relevant creatures, like any bear. It hits like stuff like Flame Tongue Kavu, just stuff that incidentally has 2 toughness.
Deathrite Shaman. Why does that card have 2 toughness?
Yeah, why?
Great
It's just
question.
ridiculous. And then like the worst case scenario for Arc Trail is 2 to your opponent, 1 to you, because you have to pick.
Mini Char.
So it's bad char, but you can
Baby char.
burn your opponent with
Yeah.
it.
Okay, so the last card I have in the non-mostly mono-red section is Burst Lightning. And so this is 1 red mana for an instant that deals 2 damage to target creature or player with Kicker, which is coming back in Dominaria. Maybe there's still time for a Burst Lightning reprint. Kicker 4, Burst Lightning deals 2 damage to target creature or player. If it was kicked, it does 4 damage. So why do we have this separated out from all the other shocks that exist?
It's the best shock, bar none. Just the upside on it is super high, especially in non-mono red decks that are more likely to get to 5 mana and have this be able to kill a bigger creature or just deal 4 damage to finish off a planeswalker or finish off a game.
Yeah, I tell a lie. There was one more non-mono red burn spell. Alex, talk to me about Exquisite Firecraft.
Oh, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned Char. Red, and 1 generic for an instant deals 4 damage to...
Sorcery.
Sorcery. Deals 4 damage to target creature or player.
I haven't seen this arc.
It's the Magic Online promo art.
Cool. But it has Spell Mastery. If you have 2 or more instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, it can't be countered by spells or abilities.
Yeah, so this is a great top-end finisher.
Yeah, it's just like, blow up your creature or, hit your face or hit your planeswalker, and a lot of the time there's nothing they can do about it.
Yeah.
This card actually single-handedly changed the way I play against mono red as a blue deck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to start playing around this card. I know I talked earlier about not
playing
around
one
one-ofs in 100-card decks, but
Yeah.
I've just been got so many times by this as a blue mage, being like, I have all the answers, Sure, I can go to 4, that's still mostly 2-burn spell range, and then they just untap and play this, and I'm looking down at my 2 to 3 counter spells, and I'm just like, I really should have countered that lightning bolt.
Time to play
Now I'm
Misdirection.
dead.
Yeah, I did, when my opponent was at 6, go sudden shock you on your end step, untap, draw this, cast this, when they had 4 counter spells in their hand. Yeah, it was pretty hot.
Maybe Sudden Shock doesn't see enough play.
No, it sees exactly the right amount of play, I think.
Which is a little tiny bit.
A little tiny bit in exactly mono red. So now we're speaking of which, I think we're on to the mono red section. So again, we're going to provide this whole list for you in the description. So if you are looking to build mono red and you want to see an exhaustive list of all these cards, we've got them written down for you. But to just quickly go over them, the kinds of cards that find their way into this section are Sorcery Speed, 3 damage for 2 mana. Cards like Rift Bolt and Lava Spike make their way into this section.
Well, Lava Spike only hits planes.
Sure,
Rift
sure,
Bolt
so-
still has the ability to hit anything.
Yeah, but it's a little slow.
Yeah.
And then a section I have affectionately titled The Shocks, which is like everything that costs 2 mana that does 2 damage.
One mana.
1 mana, yes, sorry.
So this will be like Tarfire, Galvanic Blast,
Wild
Shock,
Slash,
Wild Slash.
Assault Battery, Seal of Fire.
If you want to go down to the Sorcery
yeah.
Speed ones.
There's a pretty long list, and they're all they're fine.
Yeah, you play them and
play
learn
them.
The end of the curve on quality sort of flattens out a bit, where
Yeah.
it's just like, these are okay.
Yep. Okay, and then lastly, Alex, you wanted to talk about this as a bit of a cautionary tale. Why do we not play Chain of Plasma very much in this format?
Well, why wouldn't you play this? It's just as good as Searing Spear.
Yeah, so it's 1 in a red for
one
deal 3 damage to target creature or player. I don't see
it's
the
an
problem.
instant.
And it's an instant. This card's great.
There's more text on it.
Oh.
Your opponent can copy this spell if they pitch a card.
That sounds worse. Why does that matter so much?
If you play this in like a creature-based deck, your opponent is going to be real happy to pitch cards to wreck your board. You could maybe play this in mono red, but it's just like, you'd probably rather play like almost anything like Volcanic Hammer or Fire Ambush, which are slower than this, but it's just like, you deny your opponent the ability to get you on this spell. The one deck that does like this is Seismic Swans, which Serge has talked about before because it's a combo card.
Yeah.
But you're virtually never going to be playing this in a straight up try to kill your opponent deck because the blowout potential is pretty large.
Yeah, and even in mono red, the reason why this is sketchy is because in the mono red decks, you actually want to be getting damage out of your creatures, and this actively hinders your ability to do that a lot of the time.
Yeah, like this is just dreadful if you have, like prowess creatures that you're trying to get pumped up and you're just like, I screwed up.
Yeah. So speaking of creatures, we're going to move on to the green section here. And this one might be a little predictable. We're going to talk about mana dorks.
We are coming back to black, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is just the logical way the segues all worked.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't worry, my two-wheeled driving around is expertly constructed in my head. So there's sort of 3 that are the tip of the top, the very cream of the crop, that don't bear that much explaining, but we'll talk about them really quickly. This is Birds of Paradise, Noble Hierarch, and Deathrite Shaman. Alex, why are these cards?
They're
great?
insane. Birds of Paradise, 1 green for an 0/1 with flying. It taps for any color. So it's a dork that taps for any color. That's great. It also flies, and it doesn't have Defender. So it'll save you 1 turn against Martelage. It can pick up Sword of Fire and Ice and win the game. It maybe even... it doesn't block Thundermaw Hellkite, but...
No, it gets tapped by that one.
No.
It dies, in fact.
But yeah, like just being able to block an evasive threat and buy you 1 turn is sometimes surprisingly relevant. And the ability to, grab equipment or even take like an Elspeth pump or something and just be a creature that can attack is relevant. Noble Hierarch fixes in 3 colors. She's a human druid. A 0/1.
Perfect for druid tribal.
But
Druid.
and it taps for green, blue, or white.
Yep.
And you could play this in any deck that wants just access to green, or maybe green and white, or green and blue and white, whatever. Exalted is great because this creature hangs back anyway, making mana, and then it just improves your single attacks.
Yeah.
So like your bears become 3/3s, your 3/3s become 4/4s. It's just good. And Deathrite Shaman is the 1-mana Planeswalker. He's at the bottom of this list solely for the reason that he requires resources to create mana that you don't always have access to. Most of the time you will. Like if you have fetch lands or your opponent has fetch lands or wasteland or whatever, he's probably going to have fuel. But sometimes he doesn't, which is why Noble Hierarch and Birds of Paradise are above him. Green-black hybrid for a 1/2 for some reason.
Yeah.
With 3 abilities for some reason. At rare for some reason.
Well, that part's actually good. You wouldn't want this anywhere other than
that's
rare.
fair. Tap, exile
Like if this
target
was a
land card
common.
from a graveyard, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So fixes in any color. You can splash him in green or black.
Yeah, it's a black mana dork, which is pretty...
That's pretty wild.
hot.
And there's 2 activated abilities are also crazy. For a green, tap, exile target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard.
For a black.
Black. Each opponent loses 2 life. So you can just sort of use this to saw your opponent to death.
Yep.
Yeah. Is a win condition.
And it also lets you deny them, like flashback cards. It starts chewing away at their delve fuel.
Yeah, blanks
is
a lot
good.
of other really super powerful cards. Like it blanks Snapcaster Mage, it now blanks Direfleet Daredevil, it blanks Creature Combo, it blanks Reanimation.
Mizzix's Mastery.
Well, not if you overload it.
That's true.
But
And for green, it does the same thing, but you exile a creature card and you gain 2 life. So this can claw you back into a game. Good against Reanimator, good against threats that come back on their own.
Yeah.
It's just like there's a crazy amount of value packed into this card.
Yeah, it's less powerful as a dork, but more powerful as a creature.
yeah, and that's just because of the 100-card singleton nature that you gotta... Your mana bases in Highlander compared to, say, Modern and Legacy are a lower percentage of the lands get to be fetch lands, just because you can only get 1 of each.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, Jerry, you're going to have a bunch of cards to talk about at once
Cool.
here. So we're going to talk about 7 cards altogether, and this
Yep.
is because they're only minorly different. So this
Yep.
is Llanowar Elves, Fyndhorn Elves, and Elvish Mystic. These
They're
are
the
all
same
the
card.
same card, just a single green for an Elf Druid that taps for a green. They're all even Druids, I think.
They are.
Yeah. Then the other 4 you're going to talk about are Arbor Elf, Avacyn's Pilgrim, Elves of Deep Shadow, and Boreal Druid. So Arbor Elf taps to untap a forest, Pilgrim taps for a white, Elves of Deep Shadow taps for a black, and Boreal Druid taps for a colorless.
And Elves of Deep Shadow, you lose the life.
Correct.
And Boreal Druid makes snow mana.
Yeah. Well, basically,
it?
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It does. It's a snow permanent. Any snow permanent taps for snow mana.
I see.
So the reason Arbor Elf is the best of these 4 is because it potentially fixes other colors with help of, like, say, Taiga, Bayou, Tropical Island, and Savannah. It can make the other 4 colors. Same with the Shock lands or the Cycling lands or whatever version of Forest, Mountain, etc.
Yep.
you have. So it's got huge upside there. Avacyn's Pilgrim making white is really good, and often in green-white decks, Avacyn's Pilgrim is even better than the Elf Druids that make green, because often you have to slant your mana boards towards making green, because that's what you want your turn 1 play to be. But you really, like, once you have green, you don't necessarily need an abundance more green. You often even have more double white spells than double green spells.
Like you want your curve to go green, white, white, which is...
Exactly, and Avacyn's Pilgrim can really help facilitate that. But it does, in other decks, just get played as, like, a second Boreal Druid,
It
basically.
functionally makes colorless
Yeah.
mana.
Elves of Deep Shadow is great because, once again, it fixes a different color, which is really powerful. And Boreal Druid is just makes a colorless mana.
Yeah,
The snow
it gets
snow
you up
mana
one.
basically doesn't matter.
One more benefit of Arbor Elf that Allison used to play, and some people will play, is that untapping a land that has Wild Growth or Utopia Sprawl on it
She still plays
doubles it.
Yeah, that is a pretty big game.
Pretty clutch.
And so we have actually kind of structured the Mana Dork section thus far into, I think, 3 sections. The first is like you're playing the very best Mana Dorks. You play those 3, the Birds of Paradise, Noble Hierarch, and Deathrite Shaman. Then if you want to play like some Mana Dorks, but you only want them to make green, you obviously just play the green ones. Then if you're playing a lot of Mana Dorks, you're going to play the 10 we've listed. And if you want to play the kitchen sink of Mana Dorks, you're gonna include these last 2 that I'm gonna get Alex to talk about here. So this is Jiraga Tree Speaker. This is 1 green for a 0/1 or 1/1, sorry, that can level up for 1 and a green, and at level 1 it taps to make green green. Then you can level it up and it becomes a 1/2. And if you level it up all the way to 5, it makes your elves tap for green green. This almost never matters. Then the other one is Green Sun Zenith, which you'll note is not technically a Mana Dork, but this card goes and gets Dryad Arbor, which does a similar thing on exactly turn 1. So yeah, talk to me about this.
Dryad Arbor is a really, really weird card. It's a land creature. So it's a forest, but also a creature. So it has summoning sickness, which means you can't tap it for mana the turn it comes in. But you can tap it for green, and it costs no mana to play. It does cost a land drop to play. But you can also Green Sun Zenith for 0 because its converted mana cost is 0 and just put it into play. So you can cast Green Zenith, X is 0, put Dryad Arbor into play, and it's like you played a Mana Dork.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same idea. Gets you ahead.
You know, so it's a play you can make. It's a play you can make in Highlander. You can also fetch for Dryad Arbor because it has the forest subtype. So, you know, there's sort of cases where you might want to get a creature off of your land. So it's like if they edict you and you've got some big dumb idiot in play, you're like, you know what? I'm going to feed it the tree.
It's also pretty good in Dryad Tribal.
Yeah,
Also, never play the FTV Dryad Arbor ever.
Yes, you're a monster if you play this copy of... why did they do this?
Yeah.
The actual card of this art looks a lot like a forest. Just
Yeah.
Like a lot like a basic forest. Enough
Yeah.
that you could mistake it for...
very
easily.
Yeah,
Thank God there aren't foreign versions of this card. That'd be even worse.
The worst is that the text box is just a tree.
Yeah, I know.
Like, at least put flavor text in it. It's
Yeah.
so bad.
Okay, so lastly in the Mana Dork section, we're going to talk about the next level. So let's say you've already got these 12 Mana Dorks in your deck, or you've got 10 of them, but you want more mana. You crave more power. You know, a typical experience for us playing Magic, I think, not unreasonable. Jared, talk to me about, I've got 4 of them here. There's 4 2-mana dorks that we sort of think are the next echelon of cards you might play. That's Lotus Cobra, so this is a 2/1 for 1 and a green. That's Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, you can make any color of mana. Sylvan Caryatid, which is a 0/3 with Hexproof for 1 and a green. That taps for any color of mana. It has Defender as well. Wall of Roots, which is a 0/5 for 1 and a green that you can remove. You can put a... -0/-1 counter on this card.
My brain.
Each turn, so you can do it on your turn and your opponent's turn to add a green mana, and then Overgrown Battlement, which taps for green equal to the number of defenders you control. So
and it's a 0/4.
And it's a 0/4. Talk to me about these cards.
So the first 2 you'll often see play in multicolor mid-range decks to help fix their mana because they add mana of any color. Wall of Roots and Overgrown Battlement you often see as like the next level in decks that just like really want to turbo to 4 and 5 mana. Wall of Roots is great with Court of Calling, especially because you don't need to tap it to its mana ability. You just need to add a counter.
Yeah.
And it's great with cards like Worldly Tutor because you can use it for mana on your turn and then use it to cast Worldly Tutor on your opponent's turn. Overgrown Battlement sometimes taps for more than 1 mana, so it's also great.
And it blocks.
Yeah, I mean, the mana walls, like, you could maybe sneak Vine Trellis in here. That's, like, pretty far down.
Doesn't really see much play anymore.
No, but, like, if you were going insane. Because these cards, they develop your mana and sort of give you a safeguard against, early aggro.
Yeah.
So they're sort of doing double duty.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Speaking of double duty, a lot of these black removal spells can kill more than one thing. So this is the last thing we're talking about. We're going to talk about black removal spells, and we're gonna break these down into sort of categories and group them together. The big thing, actually, it's kind of interesting. There are not that many decks in Highlander that want to play a lot of black removal spells. I think it's safe to say. Most of the time, black is a splash color, and we've talked about it a bunch on the show already, but it's a pretty greedy splash color.
It's a greedy, like, weirdly...
Just greedy color at all.
Yeah, it's a greedy color which in some ways makes it, and I'm making air quotes for everybody who's listening, it's the worst color.
I think it is the worst color.
Yeah, because
Highlander,
I mean,
oddly.
just because of how difficult it is to splash. That having been said, it has access to some of the most insanely busted cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But big picture, all the black cards that exist, overall, not as great compared to other ones.
Yeah.
Another big issue for black removal spells in the format is that there are a lot of matchups where black removal spells are just dead, whereas the burn spells we talked about earlier that kill creatures in some matchups will go to the face in the matchups where the black removal spells are dead. So
Yeah, so it's like black removal, broadly speaking, has better creature killing capacity, but red removal has way more flex to it.
yeah.
So when we're talking about these black removal spells, we're going to sort of break them down in a couple of ways. One of the things that's important to talk about is how versatile they are, whether they're restricted to things and what they miss in the format. And then the other thing is how expensive they are. So you'll find that the unconditional removal spells tend to be more expensive, and so there needs to be a lot of kind of like equity that you're getting for paying more mana for your removal spell for them to be worth it. So basically the best black removal spell we've got in the format now, this is not going to come to a surprise to anyone. I think this is Fatal Push.
Yeah.
And I think we can fairly comfortably pass over this one. This card's really good. It kills a lot of things, and it's really cheap, really splashable. Let's start talking about some of the more interesting ones that are challenging to evaluate. So really high on this list we have Go for the Throat, and I think I might rate this a little lower, but Alex, you really like this card. What do you like about this
This
one?
is the Doomblade you play first before the other Doomblades. It's instant destroy target non-artifact creature. I feel like maybe this card has gotten worse with the prevalence of plats
Yeah,
now.
that's what
but
I found.
It's really unfortunate.
It was on top of the pile for a lot of the time
you're
because like
absolutely
it
right,
kills virtually everything, and people weren't playing a lot of artifact creatures. So I don't know. Maybe it's Doomblade's time to shine again. But
it
this
could be.
one is one of the less narrow ones because a lot of the black removal has the same text where it's just
It
like
is going to kill
non-black.
most things.
But yeah, like you're going to be sad drawing this against Wormcoil, but it kills the germ token
Yep.
on Batterskull. So that's a thing.
All right, next let's talk about a really versatile removal spell. This does a bunch of stuff. This is Collective Brutality. And this one's almost a little bit of a cheat, right? This has
Yeah, it's
other
almost
text.
not fair.
Yeah.
So Jared, talk to me about Collective Brutality.
So the reason this card gets on the list is because technically it can be a removal spell, but this has the huge benefit of when the black removal spells are dead, that means one of its other modes are often going to be really, really good. And you can always transform other cards in your hand into other modes on this card. This card's just
Yeah.
so insane. It's never dead.
This is the
You always
single best
wanna
card
draw it.
against mono red in your hand, usually.
Yeah, you'll often cast this for all three modes against mono red and love it.
Take them to Brown
Also,
Town.
pitching cards to escalate Collective Brutality is sometimes relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Reanimator loves this card.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I agree. Sorry, what were you were going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, like, the removal aspect of it, what we're talking about is, like, target creature gets -2.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, we should read it. So it's one in a
kind
black
of-
for a sorcery.
Yeah.
It has escalate, so you can choose one or more, but for every additional mode you choose, you have to discard a card. And the modes are target opponent reveals his or her hand, you choose an instant or sorcery from it, and that player discards that card. You can give a creature -2/-2. It's a removal spell.
Yeah.
And target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life.
This is a little bit like a burn spell, because it either kills a creature or goes to the face.
I've burned
Yeah.
people to death with this card in
Same.
Tin Fins before.
Sweet.
Let's talk about the Doomblades, because they're sort of next, or they're next-ish on my list. We'll figure it out. So the Doomblades we have on here, Malicious Affliction is a Doomblade, right?
Yep.
Yeah, black for destroy target non-black creature. Or if you have Morbid, it kills 2 non-black creatures.
This card's super sweet.
And it's relevant because it makes a copy of it.
Yeah.
So one counter spell doesn't stop a morbid malicious affliction
Oh, I did not know that's how that
because
worked.
it creates a copy of malicious affliction. And
On
you can
the
choose
stack, it's not on resolution?
correct.
Wow.
Pretty cool, huh?
It's when you cast.
Wow, powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this one's better than Doomblade, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Next we have...
If you can cast it.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, just to finish the thought on this, like, black is a little harder to cast, harder to splash, but like the blow up potential that you can get with this card, it's insane in aristocrats. But even like sort of aggressive decks where you just like, you know, maybe you're getting chumped or you're chumping, you know, to take out 2 other huge creatures. It's just like it's 2 things dead for
Yeah.
one.
So next in the Doomblades category, we have actual factual Doomblade, just one in a black
real
for
actual Doomblade.
destroy target non-black creature. So the reason why this card's good now is because there's a bunch of Platinum Empyreans running around that need to die. Obviously, we gotta kill the Platinum Empyreans. That card's too powerful. Ruins all my decks.
Yeah.
Don't you play that card?
Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, so I mean, enough said. This is sort of the level of
it's
evaluating
Doomblade, ruining internet arguments on card evaluation
dies to Doomblade.
since like 2010, I think.
Now,
Baneslayer is sort of the start of those arguments, I
It's
think.
like, it dies to Doomblade, who cares? It's like, well, okay, whatever.
let's talk about the. Oh sorry, no one cares.
Yeah, it kills Platinum Empyrean, so whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about Gastly Demise, which is also Doomblade-esque, except even more context-based.
Yep.
So, do you want to tell the people what this card does?
Sure. It's a black. Destroy target non-black creature if its toughness is less than or equal to the number of cards in your graveyard. So this can sometimes be better than Doomblade because it's cheaper. So, just one black is a lot easier to cast. You are sort of hamstrung on having to outstrip the amount of toughness on the creature, but for some of the lower end creatures that don't have that much toughness anyways, this is always going to take out a V-Cleek or something like that.
Or even just a mana dork on turn 1.
Yeah.
Black doesn't actually have that many 1 mana removal spells to just sort of cut the green decks out at their knees before they get going, especially on the draw. And just being able to nug their mana dork on turn 1 is a big deal sometimes.
Yeah. I think the number one asset of this card is its super low mana cost.
For sure.
And, I think I like playing this in decks where you have the ability to fill your bin, either with more black removal spells or fetches and other types of spells. This would probably be okay in blue-black or something, or black-red or whatever. So.
All right, if 1 mana for this kind of effect is powerful, how about 0? Let's talk about Snuff Out and Slaughter Pact. So Snuff Out is 3 and a black, technically, for an instant that says destroy target non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. It's even better. And if you control a swamp, you can pay 4 life rather than paying Snuff Out's mana cost. And then Slaughter Pact is 0 mana, destroy target non-black creature at the beginning of your upkeep.
Does Slaughter Pact let you kill artifacts?
Correct.
Oh.
I don't think it does.
I think it does. We can check, though.
Yeah, just non-black.
Target non-black creature. I played it
Yeah.
last Thursday, so I was pretty sure.
Sweet.
And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you have to pay 2 and a black, and if you don't, you lose the game. Free Doomblades.
I love Snuff Out so much. It's one of my favorite, maybe even pet cards. In heavy, you have to play it in heavy black because if you can't pay the alternate cost, there's virtually no point to running it.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to reliably get a swamp in play, whether that's a dual or an Urborg or just a basic
notably,
swamp.
it's not basic swamp. You
So
can't.
any swamp. So it will work off of an underground sea.
You also sort of have to not care about your life total. This is not good in the control decks. You need to be.
This is maybe a quintessential Sui black card.
Yeah,
where
I
it's
think
just
so.
You're paying no mana and just chucking your life total at an opponent.
For sure.
It comes out of nowhere. It you can use it to wipe out blockers, or just end of turn when you're tapped out, take out their guy, untap, kill them. It's just handy. I like it a lot. And Slaughter Pact is sort of similar, easier to play in more decks. It's very ham. It's the same kind of effect where it's it comes out of nowhere, it's free, you kill mostly anything. But remember to pay for it. And remember to be able to pay for it.
Yeah. Nothing better than Slaughter Pacting someone and then they play Blood Moon.
Well, then you just die.
Correct, yeah.
You super die.
Oh, yeah.
Super mega turbo die.
Okay, now let's go talk about the less conditional or the black removal spells that kill almost everything. So we're going to start with Dismember. This is the cheapest, and it doesn't technically kill anything, but this is 1 black, and both of the black mana is Phyrexian. For us, an instance that says target creature gets -5 until end of turn. So this kills almost anything, right?
Yeah, basically anything that's being cast fairly in Highlander. It's not gonna kill all the reanimation targets. Not gonna kill everything put into play with sneak attack, but it kills basically everything
And
else.
even creatures that have more than 5 toughness, you can combine this with a good block and kill it in combat.
Exactly.
Yep.
Dismember is really, really good because you can cast it for super duper cheap, one generic. You can cast it for no color, which means that you can do it when your mana's awkward, or you can play this in a deck that doesn't have access to black at all.
Yep.
Also, if you
Just kill
have
stuff.
spare mana floating around, it doesn't cost you the life, which can be relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've cast Dismember for 3 plenty of times. It feels pretty good. You're just like,
Pretty
yeah,
fun.
this doesn't hurt at all.
The next one we're going to talk about is Murderous Cut. So this is 4 and a black for an instance that says destroy target creature that has Delve.
Yeah, so quite often this is 1 mana, destroy target creature. The Delve cost isn't too heavy, so it's pretty easy to play this along with at least a few other Delve cards. Even paying 3 for this isn't a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably get this down to Doomblade-like cost pretty easily.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
the
for
thing
sure.
too. If it gets down to 1 and a black, you're very happy to pay that cost
yeah,
to destroy
definitely.
any creature. Even if it's 2 and a black, it's like not as amazing, but the nice thing is that it's flexible.
Yeah, but it just blows up anything. So
Yeah, for sure.
And lastly, we're going to talk about the catch-all removal spells in black. So we're going to talk about Hero's Downfall and Vraska's Contempt, which both are removal spells that can hit either creatures or planeswalkers. So Hero's Downfall is 1 black for an instant that says destroy target creature or planeswalker, and Vraska's Contempt is a 4 mana instant that's 2 black for an instant that says exile target creature or planeswalker, you gain 2 life. So Jared, why are these cards powerful? Why do we like them?
So these cards see a lot of play in the mid-range decks that really want to be able to answer anything. Typically the decks that don't play black and white, because the black-white answers are just better than the mono-black answers. But these cards see play because they want to be able to, they just want more like catch-all answers from their removal spells. They don't want their cards to be dead. They want to be able to hit the control decks, planeswalkers, hit the aggro and mid-range decks creatures.
Yep. Seems very reasonable. Well, that's actually all we've got for the removal spells. I hope that you've enjoyed the sort of nuts and bolts episode. If you did, comment and let us know. And if you have more kind of categories of cards you're curious about, we'll see what we can do. Maybe we can do another episode with things that people have requested,
Yeah.
more nuts and bolts. We want to help make it so that it's a little easier to approach brewing your first deck. At least at the very beginning, 100 cards can be really daunting, the notion of getting that many together, and we want to try and
Yeah.
simplify that process for you. So let us know what you thought, everything like that. We're now going to move to our last section, or penultimate
Oh, boy.
section. This is powerful magic. It's not the same when it's not me.
Harsh.
Yeah, well, it's okay. It's not the same when it's not Serge doing the first part. It's a team effort. It's all right. Powerful magic is me today. I'm telling the story. It's my story. And last episode I talked about Dragonstorm. People were very excited about Dragonstorm.
Oh boy.
I'm going to talk about Dragonstorm some more. So I played this deck a couple weeks ago. I successfully 3-1'd with it. And whenever I've been telling people about this, I have added, Dragonstorm's a great deck to play if you plan to get exceedingly lucky. Because when you get very lucky, deck's a lot of fun. And so I was playing against one Benjamin. He was on mono black aggro, which didn't sound like a good matchup for Dragonstorm because it's a disruptive aggro deck. Yeah, he was on the old 29 land Black Lotus Phyrexian Obliterator mono black aggro. It was a saucy.
Whoa!
And so in the first game, I go Forest, Suspend, Search for Tomorrow, and then I know he's on the deck. I've seen him playing it. And then on my second turn, play Tropical, or no, I play a Black Source because I cast a Demonic Tutor. And now I'm thinking like, well, I can just go get Madcap Experiment, which is in my deck, and I'll just like put this Platinum Imperium play, and like hopefully it's enough to keep me alive. But then I realized that I had the card Epic Experiment in my hand.
no.
And Epic Experiment is blue-red X for a sorcery that reads, exile the top X cards of your library. For each instant and sorcery card with converted mana cost X or less among them, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost, then put all cards exiled this way that weren't cast into your graveyard.
Oh boy.
So instead of DTing for Epic Experiment or for Madcap Experiment, I decided to go on the alternate experiment route, and I DT'd for Channel. So then on my next turn, I've been attacked down to 14. Then my Search for Tomorrow came off suspend. I got another green source. Then I played my land for turn. Then I Channel Epic Experimented for 13.
You flip the top 13 cards and cast them all, don't you?
Correct. Yeah, it was good.
All the instants and sorceries.
All the instants and sorceries. But so I was sort of like joking with Ben at the time when I was doing this, being like, well, you know, I might lose, but it's fine. Like, I was just going to go get Madcap Experiment. And then, of course, in the top 13 cards, there is Madcap Experiment. So I cast that one, get my Platinum Empyrean and play it. But then it becomes
be
like...
nice.
Yeah, but then it becomes evident I'm, like, going to win anyway. I get to, like... explore. I'm like casting these spells, and the kind of cool thing about Epic Experiment is like after you cast them, they go to your graveyard. We had to call JR over actually on a judge call to like work out that was the correct interaction because I was casting a bunch of spells. Then I cast one of the cards I exiled was Far Wanderings, which is
Threshold.
2 and a green for a rampant growth. But if you have Threshold, it gets 3 lands instead of 1. So I cast some spells, got Threshold, cast Far Wanderings, put 3 basic lands into play.
Is this a new card?
No, it's from Odyssey.
Yeah.
And then I cast, like, one of the cards I hit was Turnabout. I got to, like, Turnabout my lands. Torment, sorry. Yeah, I got to Turnabout my lands, and then, I mean, Ben conceded before I showed him the Dragonstorm, but I was also going to Dragonstorm him.
Wow.
So I got exceedingly lucky here, because here's the other part. In all of this, in flipping 13 cards, I managed to not flip any of the relevant dragons, managed to not flip the Platinum Empyrean for the Epic Experiment, so I still got to cast, or for the Madcap Experiment, sorry. And I found Dragonstorm and was able to cast it with, like, Storm 26 or something, and that part didn't really matter. But, like, this shouldn't have happened, basically.
Should probably be borrowing that hat.
This hat's luckier, because this is the one I was wearing at the time. So anyway, it was an epic tale of an epic experiment gone extremely right.
I just imagine the Izzet Mage, you know, pondering his like big contraption, being like, "Wait," and just sticks the plug right into his brain, and his like withered husk almost dead. It's just like dragons.
We did it. But yeah, so that's it. That's my story.
Cool.
Sweet.
So thanks for all of you for tuning in this week. I know it's a little different. We got a bit of a different crew.
Just before we sign out, I was at GP Seattle this last weekend.
Yes, of course.
And I just want to shout out everyone that came and said hi and/or jammed a game with me or several. I managed to play a lot of Highlander over the weekend and meet a lot of viewers. So it was nice to meet everyone who came out.
Yeah. So thanks very much for going and meeting JR. You know, he likes meeting people. Hopefully we'll see you at more events. A reminder that this, just as everything else on the Loading Ready Run video network, is brought to you by you over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. We couldn't do this without your support, and so thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Bye.